Checkout tracking by the NPD Group brings you a receipt collecting system that gathers data anonymously through technology we created, providing your businesses with answers.
Ladies and gentlemen, we've made it to the last session in the main stage of the largest free-to-play gaming conference on the planet. Give yourselves a round of applause, people. It's been a great show, and I've loved talking to each and every one of you. And you're going to love hearing from our next speaker. He's actually been in mobile games longer than there have been mobile games. He is one of the original mobile games developers. In 2001, he founded his mobile game studio. He's been with Digital Chocolate. He's been with everybody. Currently, he is the COO of the amazing social discovery app, Unravel. Let's give a big end-of-the-day round of applause for Jason Loia.
Good afternoon. Can everybody hear me okay? Fantastic. Thank you for the fantastic introduction. Today's session is about what happens when you take gamers, game designers, product managers, engineers, in fact, a lot of those folks who met their significant other through an app that we built, very similar to this one. And if you apply the gaming theory, the game design, this is the kind of app you'll end up with. I think there's a lot to learn and then transfer back to mobile gaming as well. So how many in the room have a game studio? You're part of a game studio? And do you have multiple titles or just one flagship title? One? Okay. So that'll be really interesting. For the folks that have multiple, where you have bigger teams, some of this may sound kind of obvious, and some of it will be interesting nonetheless, though. So what happens when you take a bunch of gamers and you unleash them on making a dating app? Before we get started, though, I want to take a really quick informal survey. Who here has heard of Tinder? Just about everybody. And by the way, I know there's going to be some reluctance to answer the next set of questions here on the survey. How many people have downloaded it and actually used it? Come on, I know more than that, right? Okay, so a handful of you. So here's another question. Those that have downloaded the app, how many have actually showed it to your friends? When you're swiping through some people, you're sitting there, everybody that answered the question that they've used it has done that, which is an interesting point, which is what we call couch multiplayer. There's a really fascinating thing with dating apps where that's what people do. They love to judge each other, and they love to show their friends. So interesting part about that. What about anybody that has met their significant other through the dating app? One? Okay, fantastic. So those stories are becoming more and more common, which, by the way, to me is endlessly fascinating because in the end, those apps are really games, and I'll show you exactly what I mean by that. Let's see. So before I get into the details and the tips of what we've learned over the last 6 months with this app, I'd like to point out a couple things. We have a lot of data from the fact that we've shipped our app in beta in the UK and the US. We have over 6.5 million levels played, over 12 million swipes in our app. So we've got a ton of data. And the way our app works is that it's a social trivia app where you answer questions about yourself, then you upload a picture. The picture's blurred. You have to power through and play other people's levels to earn currency and then unlock those photos. Very much a game loop, and I'll show you that in just a second. But interestingly enough, if you're a gamer, you're 3 times more likely to use a dating app. Pretty interesting. So we've done surveys, we've looked at our data, and we've found that if you're a gamer, if you play games, you're 3 times more likely to use a dating app. Those that use dating apps, if you just check the general population and survey them, they'll say in general 64% of them have actually met somebody through a dating app. So they've gone just one step further to say, not only will I use it, I'll actually break the ice and go meet somebody in person. If you take the same prior condition of are you also a gamer, it goes up to 84%, which I think is really cool. We sliced the data very specifically by if you played one of these 2 games, Candy Crush or Clash of Clans, and you're twice as likely to have met somebody in a dating app if you've played one of those games, which I find pretty interesting. The last one I think is mind-blowing to me, which is basically the general population of people that use dating apps. If you ask them the following question, which is basically, do you think it's possible to meet your soulmate through a casual dating app like Tinder, Coffee Meets Bagel, Unravel? It's a fairly large percent, 37%. Pretty decent percent. If you apply the same filter, which is, are you a gamer, and you ask the same question, it goes up to over 90%, which, again, I think is really interesting. Now, you may be asking yourself, why is that? Is it because we're gamers in this room? Is it because we have the capacity to suspend disbelief, to believe We have the capacity to believe that anything's possible because we're gamers. I'd like to think that, and I think there's some of that. But there might be another reason too, which is just the demographics are converging. In fact, maybe they're the same demographic. So if you look at this particular slide, if you just survey the general population, which we have done, about 1 out of every 2 people have played a mobile game on their phone. And by the way, I don't know who that other person who has not played a mobile game on their phone, but there are those that have not yet. If you then sample the population of people that have used a dating app, it goes down to 13%. So maybe 1 out of 7 or 8, which kind of makes sense. Not everybody has used or is willing to admit that they've used a casual social discovery app. If you slice it by the age demographic, though, of 18 to 29, you get something really interesting, which is 8 out of 10 people have played a mobile game, have played a game on their phone. Again, I don't know who the other 2 people are that have not, but it just basically means that out of all your 10 friends, yes, they've almost all played a game on their phone. But then quite interesting, too, then it becomes 53% have actually downloaded and used a social dating app. So out of your 2 friends, whether they admit it or not, they've probably downloaded and used Tinder. The takeaway on this slide is basically that maybe as recently as a year ago, there was still some social stigma to downloading and using these social discovery apps. We focus group a lot of folks that are 22 to 27. There's no stigma anymore. It's actually quite the opposite. It's a form of entertainment, it's a form of gaming, and they do it quite regularly. I would encourage you to think about the following, that dating, if you think about it at its core, is a game. In fact, I liken it to fishing. I've put some bullets up here for you guys to ponder. But in a lot of ways, a dating game in the sense of I'm going to create my levels. I'm actually becoming my own level designer. I'm answering questions about myself in the best light. I'm uploading photos about myself in the best light. I'm setting bait out there to click on people that I'm interested in that I think I might have a chance to connect with. Again, very much like fishing. I want to point out the following bullet over here, which is sort of the asymmetry of what you see between the genders. If you think about it as dating as a fishing game, and you could all design a game like this, as we've have done, you'll see some interesting things that stand out. The ratio of swipes that I do, let's say I'm looking at girls, for every 5th girl I see, I will click and say I'm interested, and I'll set the hook, which basically means she'll get a notification that I'm unraveling her, playing her levels. For females, it's very different. It goes up to 30. They're more judicious. They're probably smarter as a gender in general, but they're very judicious about who they pick. So they'll go through 30 before they land on somebody and say, I like that guy. I will go ahead and unravel his level and signal interest, and then he'll come back to me. The bite rate to the hook rate, basically, which is after I set that hook, how many people will come back to me, again, is very asymmetrical. So for guys, I have to set about 30 hooks. Set about 30 hooks before I get a bite back. Interestingly, if you've played Tinder, and some of you have, the bite rate for females is almost 100%. Almost 100%, because the guys are swiping right on everybody, hoping they get a bite, and the girls are swiping left. And as soon as they swipe right, boom, the math works out that they're going to get a mutual match because they've already swiped on just basically one guy, right? So that's kind of the thing we're solving for, is that asymmetry and trying to make a more quality connection and not just making it based on looks. That's what we were trying to design our app around. This is another interesting thing I think that we found out, is that if you look at any social setting, it could be your game, the community in your game. It could be the bar tonight when you go out. It could just be a party in general. The steady state ratio we're finding for genders is about 70-30. It just seems even if you just organically buy ads into the game, it'll sort of gravitate and self-select themselves to a ratio about 70-30. What we find is there is a optimal ratio of the genders where people will have the most success in the app and they'll actually enjoy the app the most. And that ratio happens to be a little bit more on the female side, so 40-60, male to female. We think that's a really interesting ratio because, again, if you can sort of control that particular ratio, you'll then get a more optimal experience for both sides of that equation. So what does our game look like? This is it. And if you just look at this very quickly, you'll notice it just looks like any other game loop. The first part, level 1, is where I go and create my levels. So I can create up to 30 levels. I can answer some questions about myself, upload my best pictures. That particular level now goes out into the general pool, and people will play against that particular profile. For me, I will do the opposite now. I will go into the carousel, and I will go ahead and see who I want to set my hooks with, right? So I'll slide through the carousel and say, I'm interested in her, I'm interested in her, I'm interested in her. Now, I will have the ability to get some stats before I do this. I'll be able to see how many people have also clicked on her, How many points can I actually earn by unraveling her? And some other things that help me compute the math in my head if it's worth to go after that particular target. If I unravel her and she comes back to me and says, yes, we're interested, it opens up a chat. Very much like some of the other apps where it's a bidirectional sign of mutual interest. And then from there, it becomes multiplayer, meaning now we're in a chat session, we can exchange pictures, we can talk to each other. And as you'll see in the next couple slides, that's the ultimate holy grail for us, because we know as soon as they get into the chat session, which, by the way, is not all that easy to do. You would think that once people find each other in a game like this and there's the opportunity to chat, that they'll jump right in. Not really. So for females, they will not initiate the chat. Don't know why. And for males, even males, half of them will not initiate the chat. Even after they've answered 30 levels about the person, they've unlocked 30 pictures about the person, and they've got now the opportunity to chat with each other. We have to give them a little bit of a nudge to go ahead and start chatting. But once I can get that chat going, I know for a fact they'll stick around because they're going to have a good time in the app. So after everything we've done, after the hundreds of thousands of downloads and the millions of swipes and levels played, I'm going to give you 10 top tips on where I think you guys can apply it to your game design. And again, if you're a small shop, then some of this stuff will be super interesting. If you're a bigger shop and you've got many PMs and many designers, some of this stuff might seem fairly obvious to you. Starting from the bottom, top 10. In every game, just like a dating game, just like a fishing game, which it says, there is a funnel. There is a sequence of events that I want the user to go through and complete. And if I can get them to do that, there's a tipping point that happens where it becomes a habit. So maybe it's creating 3 levels, maybe it's swiping 6 times, maybe it's getting some contact back. But I want to properly incentivize them to do that. And there's a lot of discussion around, well, I don't want to put too many coins in the incentive reward system to do A, B, and C. But if they don't do A, B, and C, potentially you've lost them for good. So I just wouldn't be shy about the reward system. Number 9, attack the big leagues first. We found that when we first launched our app, we chose to use Facebook authentication, for example, so that we didn't get a lot of catfishing going on in our app. There's some form of authentication through that. We were losing 3 out of 10 people. They wouldn't actually give us their Facebook authentication. So we worked on that leak first. We got it up over 90%. And then all the other metrics rose from that. So I'm not saying that the small leaks don't matter. Those are important. But really look at the upstream stuff and attack those big ones first. And that'll help quite a bit. A/B tests everything that you possibly can. I've been in many a meeting where everything just feels right about the feature we're designing. Everything on paper, you focus group tested, you play it amongst yourselves, and it just feels great. But what you don't know is that potentially it's going to destroy some other part of the app that is already working. And you're not going to be able to see that until you launch the feature. If you A/B tested with certain parts of the population, you'll be able to see what's happening on the other side of the app before you release it to everybody. Trigger alarms, I'm a big believer in this now, which is if you're instrumenting the feature that you're working on, you're pretty clearly going to be focused on how that's doing and optimizing it. But if you set a trigger on all the other parts of the app, then you'll know if something's going wrong with this feature as a consequence of ruining some other part of it. You'll see it. Those triggers will go off. And again, if you're a small team, if you've got a couple PMs, you can't watch every single part of the app. So those trigger alarms really help quite a bit. Notifications. We happen to be, because it's a casual dating app, social discovery app, notifications are imperative to us. We know with great precision that if you choose not to give us your notification prompts, then we've probably pretty much lost you. You could create 30 levels. You could have a fantastic time. You can swipe on 600 people and set 100 hooks, but you're probably not going to come back. That sucks. So for us, it was really focusing on how to get people to give us the notification accept, especially on iOS, right? For Android, it's a little bit different. But once we do that, we know that you're having a good time. We know that we can retain you based on the fact that we can get back in touch with you. I don't know if it's the same in your games. I don't know if the notifications are obviously that important, but for us, it was black and white. We needed those turned on. There is a critical time in your app whenever you onboard a new user where you're going to decide whether it's the first session of 60 seconds or whether it's the first 24 hours. For us, it happened to be the first 3 days. And why is that? Because in our app, we didn't actually need the person to get through 26 levels of content. What we needed them to do was fill out a profile, put that out there into the user base, set a few hooks, and they would come back the second day to check those hooks, like a fishing game. And if they saw success with that, they would clearly come back the third day. If they didn't see success with that, they would give it one more shot. So they'd set hooks on the second day. By the third day, if they weren't seeing success, and having fun in the app, you could pretty much guarantee that we would lose them. So for us, those 72 hours were really, really important to have the player have a successful experience within those first 3 days there. We do focus groups all the time. So I can remember when we were first developing this app, we'd have maybe 2 focus groups a week, and really valuable stuff. How many people have done focus groups, playtesting? Oh, just a handful of you. Amazing, right? Eye-opening moments can really happen during those when you figure someone should know how to play your game and they're having all kinds of trouble figuring it out. And we always solicit feedback at the end of those too. But I will say there's a cautionary note there where I wouldn't design it just based on what they're telling you. There's a real smart guy named Mark Brooks who gave me some advice a long time ago, and he basically said, don't just take the feedback focus groups as the Bible, because a lot of times they don't know what they want. They really just don't. If you solicit feedback, they're going to give it to you, but they're really not sure what they want. And that's been very true. So I would encourage you to stay true to your mission on designing an experience that you think your users are going to like, even though they're telling you that it's the opposite of what they want in a focus group. Top 3 telltale metrics. How many people monitor over 12 metrics on their game? There's Oliver. How about over 20? A few? Okay. In my experience, a couple dozen metrics is actually not that unconventional. There's a whole round of primary metrics that you follow, and then some derivative metrics that also feed into that. But for me, it feels like if you can get it down, just boil it down to the top 3 telltale signs, and I don't know what it is for your game. Maybe it's D1 retention. Maybe it's the conversion rate on level 3. Maybe it's some sort of liquidity metric, as it is for us, on how many people are actually per day connecting and making quality connections or initiating a chat. That's the kind of stuff we look for. And again, I'm not saying don't follow the other 24 metrics. I'm just saying if you boil it down to 3 and use those as your guiding principles every day, it really gets the team honed in on those particular 3 right away. Find the right balance of content creation. So I don't know if most of the games that you're developing here are sort of disposable content where they get through a level and they're done with it, or if in fact you can replay the level, there's always infinite permutations. I don't know. I've found in my experience with this particular app, there's always an activity A and an activity B, whether it's resource management part that you're doing in the game, then you go hunting or you go battling. In our particular game, it was creating your own content, answering questions, uploading levels, and then going out there and setting the hooks on the folks that you were interested in and seeing what you could bring back in. There was an interesting ratio that we found, which is basically the ratio of content creation would actually determine how active I was in activity B. So if I created 3 levels, I could guarantee that I would do, say, 10 levels of outbound activity on certain people. If I went to 6 levels, it would be even more than that. And there's a certain chart that I'll show you where you can see there's an optimum level of doing that. But it's an interesting ratio if you can find it. Lastly, I'll just leave you with this on the tips. Basically for us in this particular app, because it's such a social interaction app, is that the human contact means everything. It just means everything. So if I can get a person to have an inbound contact from another human being, the chances of that person retaining an app go way up. And then it goes up to almost 100% if that happens to be a bidirectional match of interest. If you're mutually interested in each other and you start communicating in the app, it means everything. And by the way, in your app, maybe it's multiplayer, maybe it's alliances, maybe it's smack talk. I don't know what it is. But if you can get them to start communicating between humans, your app becomes the vehicle for them to have a conversation, and they will come back over and over. I'm going to run through a lot of these slides. I know I don't have much time, so I'm happy to talk about these after the session. But the takeaways are basically on this one that there's a funnel of events. If you look at the blue bars, that's the cohort on the first day we launched the app. You can see it was very lumpy. And you can tell that even the most basic thing like, hey, we just want you to fill out some levels. Hey, we just want you to swipe left on that first person to see if you like them. Hey, we just want you to click on somebody. There were a lot of hiccups in this. But just from the simple act of tuning the tutorial, changing some copy, changing the sequence and the flow, we were able to get that way up. So now it's a healthy looking funnel. Identifying key retention drivers. Obviously, retention is a very big thing in all the apps that we build. If you can identify the events that happen, that occur sequentially in your app, and then try to correlate that to retention, and I'm sure a lot of you already do this, that becomes infinitely valuable for you to help focus the team on where to apply your thinking. So let me give an example right here. The baseline red line is just I can get you through the tutorial. I can have you unravel somebody. If I get somebody inbound on you, the chances that you'll retain goes up to 50%. It goes up to close to 80% if I can make that mutual, meaning that somebody's coming back to you that you're actually interested in. And I can do that through algorithms and matchmaking to do that. It goes up to close to 100% predictor of retention, again, if I can get you to just start communicating with that person. And as I've said before, not an easy thing to do sometimes. We really have to nudge and incentivize the people to get that conversation flowing. When we first launched the game, we had 10 levels of content that you could customize on yourself. And again, it's just a question that we would ask you about your lifestyle, your values, what you think about relationships, and then you'd upload a picture. We found that there's a normal curve drop-off of level of completion until the last level, level 10, and then we find that everybody completes it up to level 10. So that told us to expand it to 20 levels, which we did, and we got the same shape of that curve. Then we expanded to 30 levels, and they did this again, so they filled out every level. And the takeaway there basically is that becomes the solo play, sort of the single player mode of our game, which is people are endlessly fascinated with filling out custom content for themselves. In our particular case, it's very personal content. So it's answering these questions and finding things that they may not even known about themselves and how they answer these questions. This last slide is just basically content investment driving engagement interaction. We have an index, engagement interaction index. The more I can get people to fill out and invest in the content on themselves, which then goes out to the pool where other people play, it goes up and to the right, obviously, right? So if I invest the time, then I'm going to be I'll have a higher correlation of going back out into the community and interacting with them and communicating with them. So we spent a lot of time trying to get people to invest the time to fill out their levels. The blue and the red just is a division between males and females. So you might ask yourself, what are the top 5 predictors in our particular app of player success? And again, I encourage you to give this exercise some thought around your own app. For us, it was sort of a hierarchy of needs. If I can get you to do step 5, then you are a certain percentage of being a successful player in our app, and 4 and 3 and 2 and 1. The bottom rung was just, can I get you to fill out 3 levels? Because if I can, then I know you're a believer in the app. I know you've gone at least far enough that you're going to give the app a shot and go unravel some other people. If I can get you to level 4, which is attractiveness bands, this is interesting. I may be clicking, my click-through rate when I'm out in the pool may be 1%. And I may be trying to reach out to a girl who has a 20% click-through rate, which means our attractiveness bands don't quite match. But maybe I'm shooting too high, I don't know. But there is a correlation there between player success if that is too much of a mismatch. If I reach out to her and play 18 levels on her, and she plays 18 levels on me, we have a corresponding mutual level play, that's a really good sign that we're going to have player success in the app. If I constantly go out to people and I'm unraveling one level, and they're unraveling 10 level back on me, it's not going to be a player success match. And the last one I'll just say is we call it the high volley count, right? So if I'm one of those folks that once I find someone that I want to play with, it's a mutual interest in playing multiplayer with, and I actually engage in a chat, and it's more than just, hey, how you doing, what's going on, but there's actually a sign that we're going into 6, 7, 8, 9 threads, then all of a sudden I know for a fact that user is having a good time, that user is coming back, and they will interact with the rest of the community. The funny thing about a dating app, by the way, is if you're really successful in connecting the right people, they churn because they found somebody. But they'll be back. They'll be back. I think, where did I go here? OK. I'll leave you with this. We have several hundred questions that we have in our database that we serve up to the population to fill out their levels. And again, as I was saying, interesting questions from what kind of food do you like? Do you think it's okay kissing on the first date? Do you believe in UFOs or ghosts? Super interesting questions that are playful yet revealing. Turns out we can tell, obviously, which are the most popularly answered questions because you can skip questions that you don't want to answer. And it also turns out that there's a correlation between if you answer certain questions the same way with as the other person did, it actually will correlate to whether you guys will be a successful match. So the top 2 questions that correlate in this particular case, number 2 are the type of booze you like. So if you like beer, red wine, liquor, I guess fruity cocktails is in there. That's one of the questions that's the most popularly answered and will be a sign of whether you will have a good connection with the other one. That answered in combination with the next question is a predictor of how successful you'll be. And it's describe your level of spirituality. It's a much deeper question, right? So do you believe in God? Do you attend services? Are you agnostic or don't believe in God at all? Don't know. Those two questions predict whether you'll have a successful connection in the app. Quite interesting. So I'll just leave you with, in the end, it comes down to, I guess, as always, God and booze on whether you'll have a successful match. And that's it. I'll hand it back, and I'll take any questions.
Ladies and gentlemen, please give it up for the one, the only Jason Loia. Do we have any questions? We have lots of questions. Keep your hands up. The microphone is coming. Unfortunately, we only have time for one question, but that doesn't mean you can't mob the stage and pull them apart like a wishbone afterward. We don't need the stage anymore.
You mentioned that one of your leaks was closing in on the Facebook sign-up. What was your solution to that leak?
We did several things. One of the things that was a best practice, at least in our particular genre of applications, was to very clearly and prominently in bold state that we never post anything to Facebook. Because it's a dating app, there's obviously a little bit of some reluctance to do anything around Facebook because it might show up on your feed, right? So doing that was a big deal, obviously, but also just changing the sequence as well, which is to let them browse around, and then at the point where they wanted to engage with a user, asking them, okay, well, you got to sign in with Facebook if you want to do this. So, that's right. That's exactly right. Try before you buy. That's exactly right. Good question.